today's summit is important. It's important for Huntington's future, Southern West Virginia's future. But let's leave with this one point in mind. Oftentimes, people around the country will say to us in Appalachia and in Southern West Virginia, right, Senator? They'll say, as the nation moves forward, then Appalachia will have its opportunity to move forward. Now, if you're like me, that kind of, excuse me, pisses me off. Let's turn it around. Let's have our conversation today as how we transform Appalachia and our economy in Appalachia. Let the nation go forward on our coattails for a change.
I think the key really is every community has assets. Every community has strengths. And the key is to build on those strengths. And as the mayor, I think, hit really a central theme that we need to adopt around the country as legislators is how does the federal government partner with local communities who have already identified their assets, who have already identified their game plan, have already identified what they need to do, whether it's from the educational side, the research side, the manufacturing side, the quality of life side, arts and entertainment. How does the federal government have policies that can help all of those communities around the country, but leave the flexibility in the hands of the locals and bring technical expertise, bring best practices, and bring some money in? And Ro and I have ideas on a modern day shop class so that things we've left behind in the past, got rid of shop class, one of the great mistakes I think we made in the country. So what's shop class 2.0 look like with 3D printers, with CNC machines, with everything that will prepare our kids for the future? So tap into the assets, flexibility, help from DC, build that ecosystem around whatever those assets are, and then create a pipeline for workers to go into that ecosystem.
Let me tell you, we're not going to be able to build an economy for the future just based in Silicon Valley or just based in Boston or New York. We need every single American to be part of building this country's future. And we know that places like Huntington have an extraordinary workforce, extraordinary work ethic. How do we know that? Because you built, through the coal industry and others, you built America's economy in many ways. So we know that people here are capable of extraordinary things. And you have all the assets. You've got a great university, you've got collaboration, you've got, the mayor told me you were voted, or you won the competition as the #1 city with these grants for revitalization. So what my hope is that we can see the partnership and the opportunities, that we can see that, look, here it's the cost of living is not as high as some of other areas. You can actually now work in your community. You don't have to leave. People say, well, why can't people just leave, right? I mean, this was why can't they just move to some other place? I asked people in my district, I said, you want to leave? Not many hands go up, right? So most people want to live where they grew up. They want to live with their families. They want to live in the towns where they made a contribution. And I think that our new future, our technology future, will enable that. Because now you can work for almost any company in the world being in Huntington. If you have the infrastructure, if you have the broadband, if you have the education, you don't have to leave. You can actually build that economy and stay in the communities you grew up in. And I think that is the kind of partnership that is going to enable opportunity here. But one other point, it's actually in the interest of companies in my district to partner because they need the talent. They need more people who to hire. And so they need to, I think, expand their imagination and partner with places like Huntington to build their own workforce.
So first, in getting to the education aspects of it, I think you get to sort of couple back to some of the groups that I advocate for at the State House. One being workers, okay? First and foremost, we need to keep on, and with the good help of my buddy right here, fighting for workers' rights, all right? Making sure that we have livable wages, making sure that we have a safe workplace, all right? Making sure that people have a dignity with that job. Because what that does in the end is that makes sure that that is a happy home. And when that's a happy home, that's how you're first and foremost able to provide for a child. Just really quickly, when you look, you're talking about young people, all right? Young people, I don't care if the state's conservative, liberal, doesn't matter, but they're always more progressive places. You're talking about your Charlottes, your Columbuses, all right? I see some head nods. All right, the younger folks know what we're talking about. So you've got to truly be open to all. With education specifically, I actually just took a trip to Taiwan, all right, with some legislators from West Virginia, Maryland, and Virginia. And on that trip, I had the opportunity to talk with their education department. First and foremost, the average salary of a teacher in the country of Taiwan is higher than the average worker anywhere else in the country. They really put the value in that. They just don't talk about it, they walk it, okay? So that is very, very big in what they do. Another thing that I noticed is that they speak a lot of English. From a very young age, they are taught English. And just what Congressman Rahman was talking about, and Tim Ryan, he said 1.2 billion Chinese. If we're not teaching our children Mandarin Chinese, again, this economic summit, it's going to be really, really hard to compete on a global landscape. So we need to be thinking progressive in those manners. Another thing they do is a lot of local control, okay? Now again, that goes back to who you have in your local power, okay? But local control is essential to making the education go. I also think that we need to be doing all that we can to continue to put STEM early with educational opportunities. I think that's very, very important. Also, modern workshop, that's huge. Getting modern workshop, genuine, viable internship programs introduced earlier, okay? I can tell you right now, I had an internship, probably senior year of high school, and as a decent student, all I could think about was a football or basketball game at the end of the day, okay? So we've got to make sure we're doing these things, all right, into elementary, all right, and middle school. Introduce our students earlier to these concepts, all right? So I think that's the route that we need to go to provide for a better educational opportunity.
Excellent.
To me, it's relationships. I mean, I believe in establishing relationships. The two people to my left here, these two congressmen, they were the first two that actually said, you know what, this Ojeda guy is actually saying things that people need to start thinking about, me even listening to. These relationships that I'm excited about establishing with these two gentlemen to my left is very important because West Virginia has opportunities. We have a phenomenal workforce out there. We just need a few people to be able to give us a chance. You know, Congressman Khanna, he is from an area that enjoys prosperity. The East and West Coast does enjoy prosperity because of the technology that they have embraced. Well, you know what? We need to work together to figure out how we can bridge that gap with Appalachia and Middle America. We have people that are graduating from this institution right here, Marshall University, and the first thing they have to do is find out which state to relocate to in order to be successful in their jobs. Bluefield State is another location that teaches technology, and those people have to leave. We call it the brain drain. You know, I want to work with people to try to bring opportunities to this area so that, you know, they can come here and be made aware that we have a very low cost of living. You know, it costs $800,000 to live in a home in places in California. But here for $150,000, you can have a nice home and a decent piece of property. You know, we have a phenomenal workforce. We create the best welders in the world right here in southern West Virginia. We have people that are absolutely some of the hardest working people on the face of the earth. And if somebody's willing to come here and set up shop, we will meet the challenge. Congressman Tim Ryan, you know, he understands about military contracting. You know, we know that Level 1 Fasteners is right here in Huntington. Level 1 Fasteners used to be in California. When the riots took place in the early 90s, they relocated their companies to West Virginia. And they did so because they explained to those people, guys, we have a low cost of living, we have a phenomenal workforce, and they brought their workforce here. Now, we have to be able to expand on that. You know, when you talk to the mayor of Huntington, Mayor Williams here, you know, he'll tell you that broadband is a serious situation that we must deal with. We will never convince a Fortune 500 company to come to West Virginia if they have to go back in time. You know, but it's working with each other. It's working with, you know, the mayor and his vision that he has. You know, let me tell you something. This area right here, Huntington, West Virginia, is what right looks like. Believe it or not, you know, it wasn't very long ago Huntington, West Virginia was looked at in a very negative light. And the hard work that's being done in a short period of time have really turned things around. 41% decrease in opioid overdoses right here in Huntington. And it's because they have a phenomenal team that is working together to turn things around. Huntington is what right looks like. And when we win in Huntington, you can take the same model here and you can apply it to small towns all across the United States of America that have been forgotten, that have fallen from grace, and can get those turned back around. So to me, it's about working. It's about relationships. It's about developing relationships and using those relationships to try to help us in our area. Because let me tell you something. I don't want to sit and say that you owe us. I'm not going to look at Congressman Tim Ryan and Congressman Khanna and say, you owe West Virginia. I want them to understand that this nation did. This nation was built by the coal that come from the steel, or that come from our mountains. And that coal was shipped from southern West Virginia up to the northern part of West Virginia, where it was made into steel and was used to fix our infrastructure issues. And when the rich wage war, it's a poor who fight die, nobody has ever answered this nation's call per capita like West Virginia. I'm not saying that anyone owes us, but I'm saying that we need someone to realize that we are worthy and we need help.
All right.
So where are we with the Huntington Innovation Project? I would take up the rest of the afternoon if I started diving into the detail. But very briefly, we have 3 major project areas, and we have one overriding project that we're working on. Let's start in the west end of Huntington. West end of Huntington was decimated because we lost factories. We have a major corridor, 14th Street West, that's an antique district. We've received grants, again, a partnership with the federal government, of the National Endowment for the Arts, an Our Town grant that we received to be able to help us lift 14th Street West and be able to utilize what resources that we get from the Our Town grant to be advancing tourism for the area, because you have Camden Park, you have Heritage Village and the opportunities that's being created with Heritage Village. You have various museums in the area, and you also have entrepreneurship that's developing right there. In the Fairfield neighborhood, we've received a Choice Neighborhood grant and have organized, the individuals in that neighborhood have organized themselves. It's not something where City Hall or the federal government comes in and tells them, this is what you do. Listen, there have been millions upon millions of dollars spent in the Fairfield neighborhood. And then when the program is cut, then all of a sudden, what is left there? What we're attempting to do is to allow the neighborhood to lift itself up, own its own progress, own its future. And in doing that, with a hospital that is sitting right next to the neighborhood, imagine a hospital that's healing people, millions upon millions of dollars, in this medical center coming in, but right next to it, not even right across the street. Poverty is flourishing because something systemically is not allowing that money to be able to move from that hospital over to be able to lift the neighborhood up. The Huntington Innovation Plan and what we're planning in Fairfield is giving that opportunity of self-visualization, for the individuals in Fairfield to be able to move forward. And the last neighborhood is the Highland neighborhood. Last time, the Brownfields area of Highland was not a brownfield, was not in heavy manufacturing. It was in 1870, the year before the city of Huntington was founded. And ever since 1871 to this day, they were building railroad cars there. But 20 years ago, the railroad car manufacturer, and just in the last year or so, the chemical company that made dyes went out of business. We've received grants from the Appalachian Regional Commission, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Transportation, over $3 million of grants to bring manufacturing in the 21st century idea of manufacturing, where we're adding value to something and giving individuals the ability to receive the training at Marshall University, which is right next door, to be able to allow that property to be put to good use. And what we're looking at is having recreational use, having research and development, commercial use, and creating that opportunity. See, as many of you know, I came from the investment world, as was said. I was an investment banker, I was a stockbroker. Frankly, with everything that you started hearing that I do, and that I have done over the years, actually it was showing that I had a hard time keeping a job. But the reality is, in investment parlance, if we were looking at Huntington, West Virginia as a stock, this would be a buy and hold recommendation.
I absolutely think that we can. We just need people to come in here and say, hey, here you are. You know, when I'm talking about, you know, these congressmen here, you know, about the great things that we have, it's so that they can leave and let other people know that are looking to go someplace and set up shop. You know, hey, why don't you look at West Virginia as an opportunity? You know, because like I say, if you come to our area here, we'll meet the challenge. You know, if you want to come here and you need a workforce, we'll step up to the plate.
Hey, one of the reasons that Roe and I do some traveling to communities like this, I know why I do, is because there are so many communities just like this one, and I represent a handful of them. And so the idea why I think it can happen is because there are people just like you in communities just like the ones I represent, and they're a force. And what we need to do is get the people in each of these communities, the young people that haven't left, that have stayed, and we lost a ton of young people out of Ohio in the last 30 years as well when the steel mills collapsed. The ones who have stayed are the innovators, they're the entrepreneurs, they're the artists, they're the ones who believe in the community, believe in the downtown, want to live where their families are, want to live where they grew up, want to make things better. If we could get that cohort, that group, in every town that is struggling with the same issues you're struggling with, and use that coalition to set a national agenda, that is a political force. Because I will tell you, if you start piecing the Youngstown, Ohios of the world, with the Huntingtons of the world, with the Gary, Indianas of the world, with the Biloxis of the world, and on and on and on, that is a political force that can bring an America 2.0.
Let's be very clear. Not every federal program works. You know, and Congressman Ryan has talked about this. So people go out, promise job training, people do the job training, and then there's no job. And so we have to make sure that what these government programs are, that they're in partnership with the private industry, they're in partnership with the mayors, they're in partnership with the local community, so that they're actually leading to a positive outcome. Let me give you an example. I was down in Paintsville, and before the Appalachian Regional Commission came in and Tech Hire, they were training coal miners' kids on how to replace hard drives. Then Apple came in and said, what are you doing? No one's hiring for replacing hard drives. You got to have people learn iOS software. It doesn't require any math. It takes 4 to 5 months. Simple to do, but that's what's going to get them a job. Now, I guarantee you, the people sitting in the bureaucracy in Washington aren't going to understand exactly what the skills and credentials needed are. but the mayors, the local private industry will. And what has made America so strong in the past is that we've had a collaboration with government investment and the private industry to move this country forward. So, in some ways, what I'm saying is pretty cliched, which is, why are we messing with the formula that made America exceptional? We're the ones who had government, private sector partnership that led us to be the economic leaders of the world. And what I'm saying is just let's go back to those basic values. One final point. People, and I say this because you made the stock analogy of buy and hold. And I would say one of the dumbest things people could do would be to bet against America. And I'll tell you why. In 1965, there was a Nobel laureate economist, Samuelson. I don't know if anyone is familiar with him, but he made this prediction. He said if the growth rates continue, Soviet Union would overtake the American economy by 1985. They all disappear after their predictions are wrong. And then, I know you've referenced this person going to Harvard, and I have great respect for Ivy Leagues. I went to there, but Harvard Business School had these cover articles. America wins the Cold War, but Germany and Japan are going to dominate the post-Cold War economies. You remember that?
Yeah.
That turned out to be wrong. Why? Because they always underestimate our entrepreneurial spirit, our local control of government, our smart strategic ability to reinvent government. The only thing that's going to mess us up is if the politicians don't get it right, and if we don't have a continuation of the values that built this country.
I think that education. I think that education is the key. I think that we have lots to offer. So education, for me, we need to invest in our teachers. Recently, everybody knows that we had the teacher strike. Our teachers are fleeing West Virginia at an alarming rate. We had 728 vacancies, and I told people, when your child is taught English, science, and math by the assistant to the assistant wrestling coach, then we have a problem. And this is nothing against the assistant to the assistant wrestling coach. God bless you for stepping up to the plate. But that's the reality here. Our kids deserve the right to be able to compete. I think that we need to invest in those capabilities. Education should be number one. What Delegate Hornbuckle said in reference to Taiwan and the way they look at their teachers. We should be that way as well. It should, education is the one, when you talk to a doctor and you talk to a lawyer and you say, why do you make so much money? They'll tell you, well, it's because I have this education level. And that rings true, except for education. Education is the only place where you can have a master's plus 45 and you still live at the poverty line or below. So, I believe that we must do better in terms of education, not just in West Virginia, but across the United States of America.
I think that our federal government really, really has to invest in a lot of our disadvantaged youth. Okay? I am a delegate for a district that encompasses Culloden, okay, Hamlin, West Hamlin, all right, Fairfield, Highline, okay. All these places just need just a little bit of oomph, just a little bit of oomph. And if we're talking about West Virginia, okay, think about all the coal fields, all right? Robust leaders, in America on providing energy, providing that vision of what the American dream is. However, it is an atrocity when natural factors take place and we can't go in and have an honest conversation. An honest conversation of, no, we're not going to replace coal. We're not going to expedite its demise. But it is foolish to not give them an opportunity and say, hey, you know what? For the past 50 some odd years, you've been the leader in coal, you've been mining it. Let's look at something else, okay? Let's look at something else so that over the next 30 years, 40 years, as this market, okay, by natural market factors, starts to go away, what will be that next thing? What will be that next solar holler, okay? We need to be providing opportunities for more Brandon Dennisons, if you will, in this part of our region. So that's.
We need a new and better government. We need a more efficient government. We need to do all the things we've talked about the government needs to do, but we also need a new and better private sector and a tax code that incentivizes investments in the communities like this, that supported the coal industry, generated a lot of wealth, sent it to Washington, D.C. That tax money from Youngstown and Huntington and West Virginia and Ohio went out west to build the West. And so all we're saying now is, if we are one country, how do we get both public and private investments back in this area? So there's one of the things in the tax code, probably the only good thing in the tax bill, was the opportunity zones, which allows opportunity funds. I don't know what the tracks are here. You guys know?
We got 3.
So they got 3 tracks here in Huntington, where the governors draw areas, and in that area, people, private sector, can put money into the opportunity fund, and it's a fund that can go into business, entrepreneurship, and housing development, into only those opportunity zones, those tracks that have been designated. So Youngstown has some, Akron, and cities obviously like Huntington. Those are the kind of new ideas that we need to talk about. So that's a private sector, but also Congressman Khanna mentioned the Department of Commerce and bureaucracies and kind of old ways of doing things. As we were riding on the bus together, we were thinking, why did we have to put this bus tour together? You know, where's the Department of Commerce saying we've got all this wealth in Silicon Valley, all this wealth in Boston, all this wealth in New York? How do we get the wealth connected to the ideas that are happening here in this community? Because the government can't hire everybody. You need a robust private sector, private enterprise, private industry in partnership. And so these are the kind of ideas that I think are necessary for a new version of what the Department of Commerce does. And if a company does really well, there's a company in Indianapolis, I can't remember how many people started it, but ended up, Ro, you may be able to know the details of this, but it was like 10 or 15 or 20 people all made 30, 40, $50 million off of this one company. So if you hit that home run, then you got 20 or 30 people running around Indianapolis that each got 40 or $50 million in their pocket, and they're serial entrepreneurs. So guess what they're going to go out and do? They're going to go out and do something else and start a new company. And that's how you build that ecosystem. So I'm not saying the government needs to do everything, but if you have the proper incentives with the private sector and the tax code, you have an innovative government with new programming, you get that investment in these communities, that community will then begin to sustain itself over time. And then the government plays less and less of a role.
I think maybe it deals with a lack of opportunities, and what I mean by that is, I keep, the mayor talks about, broadband capabilities. I think that right there is something that puts us at a severe disadvantage. I keep saying that nobody wants to come, like the mayor said, obviously, the Fortune 500 company, but it doesn't matter. I mean, when you have areas in the United States of America in 2018 that still don't have adequate sewage, running water, we've got a problem. And we have a problem. It's trying to figure out how we can address it. Is it funding? Is it me going forward and trying to fight for the funding to come down here to address those issues? Do we have the capabilities in place when that funding does arrive? We are going to have to, figure out how we can step up to the plate and make this happen. But I think that there's a lot of things that we must have in order to do that. I keep saying no Fortune 500 company will come here because they have to go back in time. Nobody wants to invest in an area where they feel that if they bring their family here, their children are not going to be able to compete on a national level because of our education system. So, the reason why we have so many areas that are at a disadvantage is because of where the areas are. I don't want to take no for an answer. I want to go and say, I got it. It's going to cost more money. But if that's the case, then let's at least try to make sure that this area, you know, Huntington does have better connectivity than other areas. But let's make sure that Huntington has the best of connectivity so that maybe we can entice people to come to the outskirts of Huntington and set up shop. And then maybe then their influence will spread out a little more. And then you will cover places like Hamlin and places like, maybe that's how we do it.
I also think that West Virginia would be well served by a strong ambassador for the state to tell the story in the district. I'll tell you, when I first met Richard, he said, I want to come to Silicon Valley. And, you know, it was at, what, 2 or 3% in the polls, and Tim had pointed out that this is the type of candidate that is thoughtful. And so I said, okay, let me put you in front of a few tech leaders. And let me tell you something. I asked some of those tech leaders, one who started Y Combinator, what did you think of Richard Ojeda? They said he held his own. He was proud. He said he wasn't asking for charity. He said, this is why you have a business case. Here's our talent. Here's the investment. You need someone who's going to go tell the positive story of the economic opportunity in West Virginia. Is going to be a salesperson for West Virginia around the country to attract the capital. And I think with people like Richard and with the mayor, you have that type of leadership.
You know, let me tell you, we have a lot of people out there that are walking around as felons. And honestly, there has to be a way to put them on a path to be able to get their records expunged. I mean, there are certain crimes out there that absolutely need to be carried for the rest of their lives. But there's also a significant amount of crimes out there that absolutely, after a short period of time and a person goes without breaking the law, should be expunged so that they can get back into the workforce, so that they don't have to check felon every time they try to get a job. These people are being held back because of that, and that has to change.
I agree with what Richard said, and we should also have that at the federal level, and then also stop this discrimination, quite frankly, with people who end up in the criminal justice system to begin with, that shouldn't end up there, with low-level drug offenses and all the rest, and the private prisons that are making a lot of money off of putting people in jail. We should not have corporations making a ton of money off of putting people behind bars. That, to me, is something that should not happen. And then lastly, bringing fairness to the criminal justice system is fundamental. But the public policies that will allow us to get into these neighborhoods in these communities with investment is a public policy decision. And so the public policy decision here in the United States is this. We want to do that, and that's just what we did. And we were promised that all that money was going to get reinvested back into the communities. There's one out of the $2 trillion already. There will be $1 trillion in corporations buying their own stock. And when you buy your own stock, what happens? Price goes up. So the corporation buys the stock, price goes up, CEO sells all their stock, and they're making 40 or 50 million bucks off the deal. That's a rigged system. Take that money, reinvest it in those communities. Make sure those kids have clean water to drink. Make sure they have a good school. Make sure their teachers are paid adequately. Make sure they have health care. Make sure they have access to broadband. They don't have to go sit at a McDonald's to be able to do their homework. Those are the decisions that we make collectively as a country. And I think the majority of Americans, when presented with that opportunity, would vote for that opportunity every time. We can give a tax cut to the middle class because they've not seen their wages go up in 30 years. That, to me, is appropriate. But what's also appropriate is rebuilding the communities that were responsible for building the country in the first place. And that's the public policy we need to push to lift those kids up.
That is a great way to end this panel. We have run out of time for this panel. We're going to move into the next one. And let's just give